All right, so today we're digging into Thomas Paine. This is a guy whose words weren't just powerful, they were like gasoline on a fire. We're talking about a writer who didn't just join a debate, he pretty much started a war with a pamphlet.
Seriously, how does that happen? How does an argument just blow up into a revolution? Well, back in 1776, the answer came in the form of this one little pamphlet. It took what was basically a simmering disagreement with Britain and cranked it all the way up to a full-blown demand for a brand new country.
And that pamphlet was called Common Sense. And let me tell you, it was a total political firebomb. The guy who wrote it, Thomas Paine, he was an English immigrant, kind of an outsider, which makes it even crazier. But his argument was so clear, so radical, it literally flipped a switch in the American mindset, like overnight.
So, what was Paine's big idea? It was actually pretty simple, but it was also a complete game changer. He basically said, look, we need to stop complaining about taxes and just become our own country. You see the difference? He wasn't trying to fix the relationship. He was telling everyone it was time for a divorce. Okay, so to really get how explosive this thing was, you've got to understand what things were like in the colonies right before it came out. We're talking early 1776, and believe it or not, independence, that wasn't really on the table for most people.
Yeah, people were mad, for sure. They were protesting unfair taxes, not having a say in their own government, all that stuff. But think of it like a really, really heated family argument, you know? Nobody was really talking about getting a divorce. Yet. The idea of a complete split from Britain was still a super radical fringe idea. And that's where Thomas Paine comes in. He steps into the super tense, uncertain atmosphere and just lights a match. His words were the spark, the fuel, that turned all these scattered protests into a full-on revolution. See, Paine wasn't writing for a bunch of fancy politicians or philosophers. He was writing for everyday people, farmers, shopkeepers, you name it. He kept it simple, urgent, and personal. He basically said everything right or natural pleads for separation. It wasn't some high-minded debate, it was an appeal right to the gut. And the impact? It was lightning fast. I mean, look at this. Common Sense comes out in January. By July, just a few months later, its main argument that a total break is the only way forward becomes the core idea of the Declaration of Independence. That's insane. 6 months. That's all it took for Paine's radical idea to go from the fringe to the mainstream, to become the official position of the colonies. It just goes to show you what can happen when the right idea hits at the right time. Now, here's where Paine gets really daring. A huge part of his strategy wasn't just making a case for America. It was making a case against the king. And not just King George, but the whole idea of a king. This was a direct assault on, well, the entire way the world worked back then. I mean, he called King George the royal brute of Great Britain. You just didn't do that. He used this raw, punchy language to tear down the whole sacred idea of monarchy. He wasn't just saying the king's policies were bad. He was saying the throne itself was a joke, that passing down power through blood was completely unnatural. And this is such a brilliant way to see the two different strategies at play. You've got Paine, who's going straight for the philosophical jugular. He wants to kill the whole idea of having a king. Then you have the Declaration of Independence, which is much more of a legal document. It's like, okay, world, here is a list of all the bad things this one specific king did, and that's why we have to leave. But here's the thing. Even though their approaches were different, they were both on the same page about the big stuff. They both rejected King George, they both believed in natural law, and they both said government has to come from the consent of the governed. So you could say Paine lit the fire and the Declaration wrote up the official report about it. But here's a really interesting question. Did Paine's super radical, super democratic vision actually come true? Well, this is where the story gets a little more complicated. It's where those fiery ideals run right into the cold, hard wall of political reality. So the leaders of the revolution, the guys who would become the founding fathers, they loved Paine's call for independence. They were totally on board with that. But they got a little nervous about his other ideas. The really democratic ones, like letting everyone vote or having a super simple government, that made them a bit cautious. And this quote right here, it just nails the central tension of the whole revolution. They wanted freedom from a king, no doubt. But were they ready to create a society where everyone was truly equal, like Paine wanted?
For a lot of the powerful, wealthy guys in charge, yeah, that was a bridge too far. This table really breaks it down perfectly. Look at common sense. The audience is everyday people. The tone is fiery, and the goal is to get people riled up. Then you look at the declaration. The audience is world leaders. The tone is formal and logical, and the goal is to justify what they're doing. See? Two totally different jobs, but both were absolutely crucial. So, when all is said and done, what's the final verdict on Thomas Paine? What was his real role in the whole American Revolution? What's his legacy? Okay, here's the best way to think about it. Paine wasn't the guy who drew up the blueprints for the new government. He didn't build the house. But you know what he did? He was the guy with the dynamite who cleared the land. He's the one who made everyone believe that building a completely new house was even an option. I mean, his impact was just massive. He took these big, complicated ideas about freedom and government and boiled them down into something everyone could understand and get behind. He basically took a protest and turned it into a revolution. He gave the leaders the public support they needed to make that final, terrifying leap. Without him, who knows if it ever would have happened.
So that leaves us with a pretty big question, one that's just as relevant today as it was in 1776. What's more important for making real change happen? Is it the radical visionary who lights the spark and makes the impossible seem possible? Or is it the pragmatist, the builder, who comes in after and actually puts it all together? It's something to think about. Thanks for watching.